Hey, you are listening to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I'm your co-host, Mark.
I am your co-host Josh, and you've already heard our guest for this episode sneeze, drop a little bit of himself in there. Not as bad as Andy a couple weeks ago.
Did he fart?
But he is the comic book artist behind the independent titles necro-man, Jim Bob John, and Invisible. And he is probably one of the best guys that I know, Mr. Jason-Seaux.
What's up? Thank you for that introduction. That was awesome.
Yeah, I just realized it's been like a year and a half since we've like recorded together, and it makes me so sad. I will say that like my wife and I decided to leave Pennsylvania, leaving you behind and all the cons we did together was probably one of the top 5 hardest things I've done living in Pennsylvania.
I don't want to say that I was heartbroken, but I wasn't the happiest about the decision. But I love you and I respect you. So you felt you did what you felt you had to do, and I respect you for that. So I know that our friendship wouldn't end just because you moved out of Pennsylvania. It just absence makes the heart grow fonder, I guess.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for you guys to come down and visit us.
We should. We should.
I mean, I'm just still in the same place I've been for 40 years and haven't ever left Hampton Roads. So,
Yeah, but that might be changing soon, so you never know.
hopefully, but that's a few months.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you guys want to hear about all of the other books that Jason has done, because he's been a guest so many times, go check out our past episodes that we've done with him. He's come on and talk about The Conjuring 3. He talked about Annabelle Comes Home. He shared his story of his road to sobriety a couple years ago. That is probably one of the best episodes we've ever produced. I highly recommend you go checking it out. But let's jump into this, fellas. Mark, what are we talking about in this episode?
Talking about Se7en. It's awesome.
All right, so here's the thing is that I brought Hellraiser as my box of the month, and you brought Se7en as your box of the month.
Se7en. So it was almost breakout roles for Brad Pitt and Kevin Spacey. It really put their faces on the map. It was during that time period when Morgan Freeman was playing Alex Cross, and Along Came a Spider, Kiss the Girls, and some other movies. He was playing a lot of detective roles. And they put it together in this dark, twisted, fucked up story of Kevin Spacey's a serial killer killing people based on the 7 deadly sins. And it's fantastic.
Let me just say, I will get this out of the thing first off. So many people on my Facebook were so surprised by this statement. For as big of a horror file as I am, this is a movie that had been a blind spot for me. And I love David Fincher. This movie is absolutely incredible. It's really weird to me that this feels like this is a major studio release, but it doesn't feel like a major studio release. We talked about in our Silence of the Lambs episode, like how different mainstream horror feels. And this film doesn't have that. Like, that's probably one of the things I liked about it most is that, like, yes, there are certain aspects where it feels like you want it. Like, I'll throw it out there. When it comes to the gags of this movie, I want to see how they're produced. I hate the fact that everything takes place off screen, then you have to see it later. Like, I would love to see what happened to the judge or the lawyer with this associated with greed.
Giving his pound of flesh.
Yeah, probably
about that.
Probably the one thing that bothers me most as a horror fan and as a gore addict, I would have loved to see lust. Like, the strap-on knife is
he was so okay.
That's disgusting. That would be the worst one to see, man. Can you imagine that poor woman? Ugh.
So when they
but it would have
when they first get on scene and you see the poor man that's been forced into this outfit. He's still wearing it.
Really? Oh yeah, when they first get there.
He's
Okay.
just covered up and he's telling him, I want out of this thing. He's
Yep.
technically still wearing it.
He is.
Let me throw this over it, and then Jason, I'll let you go. How would seeing this sequence actually take place be any different than like the star attraction of Terrifier, where the woman is like upside down and like Art the clown walks over to this woman and literally slices her in half with a saw.
One of the best gags ever on
Oh,
Terrifier.
hands down.
Yeah.
Okay. So, on that note, would the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre have been better if it was actually bloody?
Uh,
Because
well,
the original Chainsaw Massacre is not
It's not
a bloody
bloody.
Yeah,
No.
there's no blood in it.
I
Every
didn't know that.
everybody remembers it as being this bloody classic, and you go back and watch it, it's like there's like almost no blood in this. It's all implied.
My dog wants to say hi.
Mine usually does. He's in the bedroom right now.
You said. Oh,
Go ahead, Jay.
well, I wanted to touch on what Mark had said with the first off, yeah, the movie's amazing, but how it's very like gritty in a way, and I attributed that to the guy's name is Gary Wisner, the art director, because if you think about it, the first 10 minutes of that movie is just set up, and like you get it immediately. It's dark, it's gritty, it's you know, um, I thought he did a phenomenal job. As far as the gags go, it seemed like they were just instead of getting into the gratuity, right, like the gore of it all, or what we would traditionally call a gag, it was the end result of the gag. Like especially the dude, like the spaghetti or the guy kept alive for over a freaking year. That would have been sloth. That was like a crazy year setup just to
Yeah.
have. Yeah, but the
I,
gags weren't overly gruesome, and you're right. I guess it wouldn't have been any worse than on the Terrifier, but I don't think that's what they were necessarily going for.
which
Again,
but which would have been in this case with this movie and the way it's done, which would have been more impressive? The fact that it deals with leaving what happened to your imagination based on seeing the end result, or actually showing you what happened.
It's the
so
psychological aspect of the end result. That's what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't get that immediate gratification. Your mind has to fill in that blank. This is the end result. This is the sentence.
and it also goes back to what you're saying about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like that's like for horror fans, that's a Mandela effect. Like we always remember it as being this like big gore fest, but it's that word massacre that like trips people up. And
Hearing the chainsaw.
yeah,
See, I
Gunnar
remember
Hans
the second and third one the most. Like the really the funky
um
one.
With Matthew McConaughey.
Matthew McConaughey was 4. Get it right.
Do you guys remember the one where the guy was like lighting up the coat hanger and like eating the back of it and or
Oh,
something?
that was 2, Mr. Bill Mosley.
That was the craziest one I've ever seen. Like that's the one that I'll always remember.
Yeah. So Mark, going back to what you were saying about like a lot of it taking place off scene, and some of these crimes are really gruesome. To like we're even like the way certain sequences are shot, you don't see them. Like the pound of flesh guy, like you don't even get to see the after, like the way that it's shot. Some of
Well,
the
they
ways
show
like
you some pictures and stuff. You
they
get to
show
see
you
the
pictures.
end of it, but that's
Yeah,
it.
but those sequences are very brief, and like the lust one in particular is also very brief. Had this movie had the uh gratuitous nature to actually showcase the
Or
the violence taking place, it would have gotten an NC-17. And what other
Mhm.
movie came out that year that held its
Showgirls.
NC-17? Showgirls. And Showgirls is, I mean, it's the one of the biggest bombs in box office history. However, it's also worth mentioning it's the highest grossing NC-17 movie of all time. But I
Never
will
seen it.
also say
And
it's fantastic.
it's also
It's
the movie that
fantastic.
destroyed Elizabeth Berkley's career.
True.
I knew that much, but I've never seen that movie. I've seen like the like little videos. She's an attractive woman when she's dancing and stuff, but I've never seen the
She
whole thing.
she did the movie for the explicit purpose of trying to break the view everybody had of her from being on Saved by
Oh,
the Bell and being Jessica Spano on Saved by the Bell.
yeah.
Comp-
She did
that,
it.
yeah, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, so hold on. Let me ask a question. We're gonna go back to the pound of flesh. What would you guys cut off? I would cut off my love handles. I agree with that, Brad Pitt. I would cut off my love handles because, first we had the pandemic and I gained like 30 pounds and then I got married. So I had that happy weight, so I had like 50 pounds I could spare. So I'm pretty sure I'd take my love handle.
I mean, I've put on something like 80 pounds in the last 10 years since I got married. So
Good
I
for you.
got plenty to get rid of. But then again, I cook really good and it's not low fat. So
Yeah, I need to come down and do we need to come down and hang again so you can cook for me because you took me to places that had good food, but you didn't cook for me. I would also go the pound of the love handles too, but I want to also bring up this gag that this gag actually was visualized by another creator in the horror that went mainstream. This is a Saw trap.
I was going to say that. I said that to Caitlin when I was
yep.
watching. I was, wait a minute, like I've seen that. And then we brought up
I
Saul.
Yeah, I can't remember which one it is, but I was like, yeah, there's one where like you have to give a I think it's six with the health inspector.
Probably.
I have to
Probably.
rewatch those. It's been a long time since I've watched the Saw movies.
Well, hold on. So was Seven came out before that that gosh, what is it? The
Seven
Saw
was
movie.
mid.
Seven was
Se-
before what the Saw movie, right?
Seven was early, late 90s, and Saw was
1995,
It was
mid 90s, and Saw was early 2000.
2004.
Yeah.
so yeah. Oh, see, I don't for some reason I didn't write down the year that it was. Oh yeah, there it is. It was released September 22nd, 1995.
So the first time I saw, or not saw, I saw Seven. I was like 19,
I love
and the girl I was dating at the time was like, "You've never seen this?" I'm like, "No." She goes, "You love these kind of movies. How come you've never seen this?" I was like, "Because I haven't." So she made me watch it, and I've owned a copy ever since.
So I have this theory that for those of you guys that don't know, we like just a little bit of like behind the scenes of like Mark and I's like working relationship. We've been talking about doing an episode on Seven for like 6 months now.
thanks
Much
for
like
thanks for inviting me to the show because it made me watch that movie and I was like, holy crap. I remember this from like my teen years and where I probably saw it in the movie theaters. And I just it brought you back to that. I don't know. The you as the moviegoer, you just wanted to see what the next sin was, like how bad
yeah.
was it was gonna get. And the way Kevin Spacey played it was amazing. It was phenomenal.
And you don't want it, knowing what's going on with Kevin Spacey, you don't want to give him the credit, but you have to
You do.
because he made that movie and he did it in such a manner that I'm going to sound like a moron for a second, but I watched it earlier this summer with Aiden, my wife's daughter, because she had never seen it. And I love forcing people to watch certain movies. And it had never
I'm
occurred
aware.
to me. It never occurred to me till I watched it this summer that Kevin Spacey actually won. The bad guy wins.
Well, Kaiser Sosa in Unusual Suspect,
Yeah, he
right?
won.
Yeah.
He did in that too.
He did amazing
Yeah.
in that, and he did
I
amazing in this. Like I know he's been canceled or whatever because of. I think sometimes people can be pieces of shit and still be good at something. Like you can have like some actors that are crazy. Who's the dude? Army Hammer that was doing some
yeah,
whacked out shit.
cannibal stuff.
Yeah, some
Yeah.
people are. He's nowhere near Kevin Spacey's acting chops. Kevin Spacey was great in Horrible Bosses too. He was horrible. He's probably what he's really like, but none of the nonsense that he did now can take away the work that he has done.
Well,
So
even on that note, there was Billy Lane built custom motorcycles, and he built amazing motorcycles. And I believe he's either been released or he's still in prison on manslaughter, where he killed somebody driving drunk, and he was notorious for it. He didn't give a shit.
Right.
And but he still made absolutely amazing bikes. He made one of the first hubless bikes. The wheels had no spokes in them. The chain drive came around the outside of the rim, so it had no inner wheel.
Mm.
And he
interesting.
put out some amazing choppers,
Well,
but he wasn't exactly the greatest person.
well, being an alcoholic and being a predator can relatively be two different things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Alcoholic
like
being
it's
an alcoholic.
so it's like it's interesting like watching this like now in an era of cancel culture because like I knew Kevin like I'd never seen this movie before like a couple days ago and I knew Kevin Spacey was the bad guy. Like that's just I feel like it's pop culture common knowledge at this point. So I was like before watching I was like, all right, how do you navigate like someone that is canceled when you're still talking about a movie? Because like one person shouldn't dictate the production of, you
It
know,
does.
a hundred
It doesn't.
thousand people.
It doesn't. I mean, as much as we would want it to, it cannot. Right? It doesn't take away
Yeah,
Morgan Freeman's role. It doesn't take away Brad Pitt's role. It doesn't take away David Fincher's work. Nobody's work on that film is degraded by the behavior of Kevin Spacey later. Right? We're talking about a piece of art, a film. If you want to cancel something, by all means, be pissed. How would you cancel? Who was that movie producer that was like a real predator?
oh, Harvey Weinstein.
Weinstein, how many movies was he a part of that are what we would consider amazing things? I've seen it a few times on the credits where I'm like, oh, you know, it is what
Yeah. It's like, but like, yeah, cancel culture is like really interesting to like navigate. One of the books that you know, again, I'm the youngest guy on this, and like I grew up in the era of Dan Schneider's Nickelodeon, and I've been reading Jeanette McCurdy's book. You know, I'm glad my mom died, and she kind of talks a little bit about like her time working with Schneider and just kind of like the toxic workplace that you know that was there, but like then you have like in the Kevin Spacey particular, like I heard him a cinephile another cinephile say this that like you should never like cancel an entire movie because of one person. Like you're like you said like you just said like Jay, like you're you know that's belittling the amazing performance that Freeman gives. Gwyneth Paltrow, Brad Pitt, David Fincher, the writer, the composer, all the producers, like all of the special effects artists in this. Like there's so many other things, like aspects of this. And when you're talking about this story, this is a 2 hour movie, and he's probably in this movie for a grand total of 20 minutes.
he's not in there long at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And you like again, like you said, nothing that you can't take away from the movie, right? Because let's talk about Morgan Freeman um, acting in this movie. He does what he does. He plays an amazing detective, right? I like Brad Pitt in a few of his movies. In this one, he served a perfect role. You know, like Brad Pitt was anger, like his anger and his everything got to him, and that's why he freaking. Are we allowed? We're allowed spoilers in this, obviously. That's why he shot him because he couldn't help himself. That's why whenever whenever he was chasing him when they first went to his thing after they got the file from the FBI on the people checking out books, right? He like shot at him in the hall and then jumped out the window and like Brad Pitt was a mess. He was all like it was personal to him now. He needed to get this guy.
Yeah, he ends up becoming Wrath at
Yes,
the end,
Yeah,
yes,
taking
I
vengeance for the killing of his wife.
yes.
I
Fucking genius.
I have to say that, like, I know you guys, we all hold this movie in high esteem.
Very much so.
I hated the one-liners that he had in this movie.
Ooh.
Brad Pitt?
It Brad Pitt. It always kind of took, like, some of his dialogue like took me out of it, where he would like uh, and like I don't know if it's like just because like I've grown up in like an era of like Deadpool. Like I understand what they were trying to do. Like they're trying to break like police procedural like formula norm by making him like the quip guy. But I was like, this just doesn't work for me when he does these.
I don't know. He had one of the best lines in the movie. If I shave off my nipple, will it be covered by workman's comp? That is one of the best lines in the movie. Followed by Morgan Freeman. If you're man enough to file the claim, I'll pay for it myself.
But that's like that example in particular is existing like at like the moment in the film where it's very young. Like I think it's only maybe like the first act. It's like it didn't really start bothering me until probably like the second or third act. But like that last like twist, I was like, all right, like I'll give it to him. Like the fact that like he put his wife's decapitated head into the box and like turned him into Wrath and like really like revealed that, and then Envy, I was like, all right, that's a good twist. Like I like it. Kind of makes the one-liners worth it.
He didn't really envy him. He just wanted to use that as a vehicle to get Brad Pitt.
Hey, that's fine.
Right. I mean, it's genius setup. The whole movie was genius.
It's Gotham City adjacent.
It is. I mean, come on.
Well, Gotham's based on New York anyway, so.
It is, but I've been in New York. It doesn't always rain. Like, that's the thing, is that it doesn't always rain. Like, but every time you see a Batman movie, it's always raining. Like the Batman, it rained all the time. I was like, what is happening? Why does it have? I get it. It sets the mood. It's an aesthetic thing. Okay, that's fine. So I have a theory about why Mark loves this movie so much.
Tell me.
So for those of you guys that have been listening to Mark and I's podcasting well before Abyss Gazing, Mark has established that he is the grumpy old man on staff here, and can sometimes have a very cynical look on life. And you are almost exactly like a spitting image of Somerset. Like, I was watching this and I was like, man, just some of the things that this man says, like, just reminds me, like, I could picture Mark saying this.
Like what?
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
So this is gonna be a perfect segue into some of the mental health aspects of it too.
So I'm the nutcase this time.
You are not the nutcase this time because now you flip the roles. Now you're Brad Pitt. Also like specifically like one of the things he talks about is the from the bar scene. He says, I just don't think I can continue to live in a place and that embraces and nurtures apathy as if it was a virtue. And I love the fact that he like goes on that same monologue, the same scene, to like talk about like how like apathy is like a solution. And for those of you guys that have like been through depression and like understand the weight of apathy, it's uh, I mean, I feel like sometimes like when you talk about mental health and like social media in particular, I think I might be the only person on this podcast that like is somewhat engrossed into the culture of TikTok
I'm
and
sorry.
mental health. It, hey, I'm younger than you, so you got to give me that. You know, that's where I make my Hellraiser content. At Gent Ghostface, GENT. Links in the bio. But particularly like one of the things that like how mental health is handled is like it's almost kind of like considered like a passive joke to where it's like, yeah, I have depression. I'm not doing anything about it. Listening to emo music and like, you know, talking to like other people at like cons and kind of their viewpoint on it, like, is kind of like really opened me up to have, you know, like that's kind of like taking something that's like serious and kind of just like making it like apathetic. Like you like you feel like you're admitting that you're stuck, but not wanting to do anything about it. And I think that like that line in particular, that whole scene really kind of has this conversation that works really well to kind of showcase like how part of our culture, modernly speaking, handles and addresses mental health.
I actually wrote that line down because when I was watching the movie, I was sitting at my drawing table, and I think I wrote apathy is the solution, or is a solution. Same mind, Josh. That thing stuck with me.
But like, go ahead, Mark.
It's funny you talking about that. I kind of remind you of Somerset, I guess, because
you're an older man that wants to live in the middle of nowhere.
Yes. I mean,
when I boil it down to those 2 points, do you feel like Somerset?
He wants to leave. He wants to retire and go live a simple, calm life without all the stress and the drama of the city. And that's kind of my issue is everything's overcrowded, everything's stressful, everyone's in a rush. And I want to leave the city to move to the middle of nowhere for those exact reasons. So yeah, I can see that. I get it. I understand. But yeah, I see the viewpoint of Somerset wanting to retire and go to the middle of nowhere. It's frustrating for me and rough for me here living in Hampton Roads. And it's not in comparison. It's not a New York. It's not a Los Angeles or anything like it. But I mean, depending on the time of the year and how many military ships are out to sea or not, there's anywhere between like 1.8 and 2.2 million people here. And everything's crowded and everybody's wound up. Everyone's on top of each other. And it's stressful just to exist. So I understand that viewpoint of wanting to leave the city to go to the middle of nowhere and just relax for once.
I mean, I don't like people, so my wife and I are in the process of buying a house, and one of my mandatory requirements is like I need like 2 acres around me. So more would be preferable.
It's like nowhere.
I'm having this discussion with my wife because we're talking about moving, and I keep finding houses on like 2 and 3, 5 acres. Mm-hmm. I found one on like 120 acres in the middle of nowhere. I was like, it's perfect. Mm-hmm. I can live there. So yeah.
Well, like to come back to like the specific scene, like apathy, like you know, I think for me, like from someone that like has gone through depression, and there's also like another point where like, you become numb to like anything after a while. And I think that that's true. Like if you like don't allow yourself to feel anything, and like I feel like depression kind of has that effect on you to where like it doesn't allow you to feel. It doesn't allow you to truly embrace the emotions, whether they are good or bad or, somewhere in the middle. And so like you just kind of like fade into apathy, and apathy eventually becomes a lifestyle. And that's a dangerous lifestyle to live. And like, when we talked about your alcoholism past, Jay, like, uh, like addictions definitely like support that numb. It definitely supports that like that apathetic, way of living. And you embrace it because you're no longer thinking about the what am I going to do today, but you're thinking about the oh, I'm just going to go with the flow and just like exist because, I'm too poor to afford, some way to kill myself, or, it's, and maybe that's an extreme case. But I mean, apathy has the power to lead to darker things like addiction and self-harm and suicide.
Indeed. Yeah. I mean, you pretty much nailed it there.
But when you look at these kind of environments like they live in, it's almost sensory overload. You see what all goes on in the streets. You see the news headlines and the articles, and it's just constant. Plus, you add in the fact that they're part of law enforcement, and law enforcement will see some stuff that would just blow our minds, even as horror fans.
Yeah.
They'll tell you real life is worse than the movies. And I have friends in law enforcement that they won't talk about things because of things that they've seen. So that's something you kind of have to keep in mind, is that they're kind of overloaded at the same time.
That's fair. And like even like stepping back from the professions of detectives of our two central protagonists, like, and just being like average Joes, like the three of us here, like, that, go into our day-to-day, day in and day out, like you mentioned like sensory overload, and like I feel like that's how living in this day and age feels like. It feels like sensory overload, but I also think it is about A, how we respond to it, but B, also at the same time the type of personality we have, to where like I would identify as a extrovert. Like I thrive on being out around people, like, and then my wife is an introvert. It takes a lot of like time and energy for her to prepare, but also at the same time it takes a lot out of her to be around people. And Mark, I would even dare say that you kind of are like a little bit of both.
Yeah, I am what the situation needs me to be.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing for you, Jason. Like I think that you're like both of both worlds, but like I think like now, modernly speaking, I think BJ Novak in his brand new movie Vengeance states it right. It's like we all kind of live in separate times, where it's like we pick and choose what we allow ourselves to be exposed to. We pick and choose when we are going to open up messages, text messages, emails, answer phone calls, be present for people. Like we are kind of like the dictators of what we allow in. So I think like even like stepping back from the ideas of, being just normal people, like there's a lot of different factors that allow you to feel apathetic or not.
That's not such a bad thing.
It's not. And I think it depends on the person and the person's like personality and like how they are intaking the content in which they're allowing to affect them.
Sure.
At the same time, we're also a society now that's more connected than we've ever been in history.
That's a big part of it. You can. It's so instant, right? Like we can just
Yeah.
we have everything at the tip of our fingers.
Everything is instant. I mean, it even affects people down to their ability to hold a face-to-face relationship. I mean, you don't, like back in the day, you went out to a bar or a club or something to meet women, or Target or the laundromat. Now you just pull up an app and swipe left and send a message, or however the damn app works. So, I mean,
How old are you, Mark?
me, I'm 42. Well, we'll be 42 in just a couple weeks.
I'm 46, so happy birthday early. But and not to sound like a whatever they would call me, a boomer, right?
Yeah, I know.
There really weren't dating apps when we were coming up and meeting women and our wives and stuff. I always say that I prefer to do my dating the old-fashioned way, which is alcohol and lowered expectations.
I mean,
like swiping right and shit like that. I never got into that. I prefer face to face. That would be the extrovert in me, Josh.
I've seen it in movies, but I actually met my wife through mutual friends. When I was early 20s, started to see like dating sites kind of come into existence and starting to come catch on with some people. But yeah, I met my wife through mutual friends, and we hung out at their wedding for a little bit and ended up starting to date afterwards. Things like that. One of my best friends I met at a concert. So
Wedding.
do what?
You met what?
I met my wife at our mutual friend's wedding.
Right.
Yeah.
Good for you guys.
So
I met my wife while I was on tour, so
it's
her dating apps over here.
Can I tell you a funny story? When I was drinking, I met Caitlin, which would be my wife. And I was probably white boy wasted, but I remember coming up from the bathroom, and there was this guy that I used to work with named Terry. We called him Old Man Terry. He was retired, but I'd always meet him for a beer on like a Friday night or something. We would shoot the shit. So I come back from the bathroom, and there is this really beautiful woman in a black tight dress, and she's sitting right across from Terry, but in my seat. So being the idiot that I was, I walked up to her and I was like, "You look like my future ex-wife." And then boom, it was on after that. I don't know. So I met my wife in a bar.
I mean, you got to meet him somewhere.
Well, they say
This is
it's
true.
one of the places you're not supposed to meet. Like, it's hard to meet somebody to have a relationship with when you're in a bar because you're both drunk. But I wore her down through time. That's what I did.
Yeah. Let me just plug this. This is another reason to go check out Jason's episode on like his alcoholism and then his like road to sobriety, because him and his wife play a really like vital part in his like recovery process. That is like
My whole family did. Everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, like, usually sobriety isn't just a one person thing. It's a teamwork. So you start, basically counting your blessings by the people you know and you love. And my wife was a huge part of that because she was so good to me.
And I love the fact that I was able to marry you guys. So
I was just looking for those pictures like a month ago, man.
I still like they're still on my phone and they still pop up in my Facebook memories every year. I'm just like,
I love it.
man, I'm so glad I got to be the one marrying you guys in a Pennywise blazer nonetheless.
You look dapper as hell, I might add too. Dapper.
Man, don't put that out there. My wife's gonna make me dress like that more often.
Well, you look good. We were actually talking about like,
Thank you.
like a 5-year anniversary camp out party at the same place, but inviting like the core and just really going at it, because I personally, as well as you, Mark, love to cook, and I've like mastered brisket and ribs because my wife bought me this smoker for Christmas. So it's game on, guys. I smoke.
Go on.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, he's been to my house and seen I have a gigantic grill on my front porch. It's also an offset smoker.
Yep.
So
Good
I
for
know
you.
I know how to run a smoker low and slow and get a nice juicy brisket when you're done. Yeah.
Amazing stuff. My wife and I tag team it, so she'll make the mac and cheese, and she's real anal retentive, but it tastes just like my grandmother used to make. So I'm like, yes, like, she's actually gonna make some. I pulled ribs today because we're gonna have ribs this weekend on Sunday.
I do a lot of pulled pork and chickens and turkeys because they're just all so easy to do.
I mean,
Yeah.
a smoker is the way to go. Like I have a smoker combo grill, and it makes me look like Chef Boyer, so it really does.
It's an art form. If it's something you've never done, Josh, smoking food and meat is an art form because everything can affect your flavor and outcome.
You know what else is an art form? Kevin Spacey's saw traps in Seven.
That was a soul trap. It really was. The moment I saw that. So thanks for reminding me on that one. That was great. So what was your favorite, if you guys had to pick one of your seven deadly sins, what would be one of your favorite gags, if you will? Like how he got it. I really, really like sloth. And can I point out why?
Yes, please.
It took a year, right, to do this just for this one victim, right? He cut off his freaking hand and set it up where it wrote "Help me," right? In fingerprints under the lawyer's upside down painting that only his wife noticed, right? All this little subtle things led to sloth. And then when you saw him, he was so gross, like laying there all like missing his hand. It was amazing. Just barely keeping him alive. Like it was.
For as much as I love like the idea of the lust one and its brutality, I love
You mean sloth?
No, like the lust one where like the chick got gutted with the strap-on knife. I think probably would say that like the sloth one is probably the best one in this one, just because like it's methodical and like it's probably one of the only few points in this movie that made me like actually uncomfortable.
So
Like,
sloth at the same time, sloth is the biggest overall statement about Kevin Spacey's character.
Mm-hmm.
It lets you know the lengths he will go and the amount of patience he has to do it.
How committed he was. He was so committed. He hung up hundreds of air fresheners to stop the stink and paid the dude's rent in cash every month. The landlord said, best tenant I ever had. Didn't say nothing and always paid his rent. He didn't say anything because he bit his tongue off or got it cut off early, but it's genius.
So now, sloth was the biggest statement of them all about Kevin Spacey. Although I was a fan of Wrath. I will always be a fan typically of Wrath.
You're talking about the very end of it with Mr. Brad-Pitt being like, oh, I mean, he did a great job. Like you could see the emotion. He was raging, and then he was like breaking down, and then he was raging, and then he was breaking down, and you could see the wheels turning in Brad Pitt's head. Like I'm gonna effing shoot him. No, I'm not gonna effing shoot him. And then Morgan Freeman, of all the times he said in intellectual and smart things, kind of just dropped the ball. Here's my question. If Morgan Freeman really wanted to save him, wouldn't he step in front of him? Brad Pitt never would have shot him. He should have been like, nope, you're not going to shoot him. Put your gun down.
But you're also dealing with a moment of temporary insanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I will also say too that the Wrath sequence in particular, like it hits really hard. And I think the reason that it hits hard is because like there's a portion of it that like for a first time viewer, it doesn't feel like expect it. And so you're like, by the time you get to Sunday and you've been through 5 sins and they skip one on Wednesday and Friday, you're like, all right, well, where are these last two sins coming into play? And then you realize, oh, envy, wrath. I was like, oh wow, like it's really impressive writing.
Yeah, the way it just bang bang on you just like that. And I think Morgan Freeman knew the level of the situation. So when the very beginning, like when Morgan Freeman ran up to Brad Pitt, he's like, got to give me your gun. He threw his gun because he probably knew in the long run, Brad Pitt would probably shoot him to get to Kevin Spacey because of the temporary insanity. What would you guys do?
Well, I man, I don't know if I want to say it on a podcast.
Okay, so can I say it?
Yeah, go for it.
Who? It's going to sound weird, but who in their right mind wouldn't become Wrath in that moment? Like, who would?
Yeah, like I felt for him, especially like in that moment where I was like, I talked about this on our Frankenstein episode. Like, I am like, I am a husband. Like, it's my wife comes before anything else. I mean, it's my wife being sick was like one of the only reasons that, like, I think in 6 years of doing events and cons, like we've canceled maybe like 3 events. And like one of them was because like my wife was just like woke up and she was just violently sick. And like, I was like, I'm not going to go and like do something, my wife is always going to come first. So like I understood and like got with that, got behind Brad Pitt in that moment.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's always, you're always going to know that the justice system doesn't always work. And now you're in that situation in the moment. The planets have aligned. You come out with a temporary insanity plea on vigilantism.
Which I also want to talk about, like the ride to the Wrath Envy thing, where Brad Pitt and Kevin Spacey are going back and forth. And Brad Pitt like completely belittles Kevin Spacey the entire time, like just calling him insane, and I think it's really heartbreaking to watch those sequences because like people always fear what they don't understand. And so like you can't understand like why a murderer would murder someone. I am fascinated by the psychology of serial killers and like why people do the things that they do. But like, to someone that like doesn't understand, why you do something, like I got called weird and crazy because I said that like I preferred Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 over his first Halloween. And
what?
Like, Jason, I have Halloween 2 Michael Myers tattooed on my hand.
Can we come back to that?
We could come back to it off air. I'm using it as an example. But like for years before like it gained the cult following it has today, like people thought I was insane. And like I just thought it was really like satisfying to kind of see that like he ultimately became the very thing that he was mocking in that moment.
Well,
go ahead.
So Morgan Freeman warned him in the very beginning of this investigation, right after they found, was it Gluttony, the spaghetti dude that he made eat spaghetti until his gut flew out, right? He's like, yeah, Brad Pitt plays a good character in that he's just I thought he was just angry the whole time. So he's like, what did he say? He's some whack job. And Morgan Freeman's like, don't underestimate him, that, like don't call him that, like that kind of a deal, because he knew basically there was more to this killer than just some nutbag.
Well, even during the scene you were talking about with Brad Pitt putting him down at the end while they're traveling out there and everything, Kevin Spacey just kind of calmly tells him, remember, you're only alive because I allowed you to live. I mean, how else do you put somebody in their place that's putting you down that badly as Brad Pitt was? And that's your response.
I mean, he knew the end game. He wanted the end game.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin Spacey basically stole the whole movie, although it was a great movie, but the Kevin Spacey's acting in it really did a good job. As much as everybody hates him, but he did an amazing job.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
In a lot of his roles, Kevin Spacey is similar to Keanu Reeves. Kevin Spacey plays Kevin Spacey characters really well. Keanu Reeves plays Keanu Reeves characters really well, but they're all essentially very similar in the way they're done and he acts, and it worked extremely well for this.
Well, so this comes out the same year as Usual Suspects, which we've already talked about. And like, there's so much like crossovers with these characters. Like, obviously, this is a darker character, a little bit more sadistic than his Usual Suspects one.
But the
But
guys are supposed to say limp.
yeah, but like, I think you're right. Like, I've seen Kevin Spacey do a lot of roles, and like the roles that stick with me are the roles that like are Usual Suspects, are American Beauty, are Se7en, roles that where he's like sadistic AF, and he's good at playing that bad guy. Like, I think one of the moments that like really sent chills down my spine is there's a sequence where like the Fincher has him like close up, and he's like talking to Brad Pitt, and he's just kind of looking dead-eyed right in the camera, and his eyes legitimately just look dead. And I'm like, man, there is like no humanity in this dude, and he just looks, I think it makes it that much more effective that he's the serial killer of this movie.
You talking about where at the end he's talking about being envious of his family and his wife and future kid, and then he just he kind of turns and goes, "Oh, he didn't know."
No, I'm talking about the sequence where I brought this up earlier, and like I got sidetracked because I started talking about it, but like it's the sequence where him and Pitt are going back and forth in the car, like when he would call him like crazy, but he like wouldn't like evoke like a response or like emotion. And like it's that, but like that scene in particular, like what you're talking about, like, oh yeah, he didn't know, like that sequence also too, I thought was just a extension of that, like that dead-eyed look.
I mean, he may have put on one of the best bad guy performances probably ever in that movie, or at least top 10 easy.
A sadistic bad guy, like a well thought out. He had a goal with the 7 deadly sins, man. It was, like it was always going to end. Most serial killers just want to keep going. That's seems to be their nature. They'll lie and say, "I wanted to get caught," but Kevin Spacey really wanted to get caught to the degree that he turned himself in.
Well, Morgan Freeman made the statement at one point that this is his sermon.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was going to get caught because he set it up that way. And
What does he say in the car? Where he's like, there used to be, if you want to get people to listen to you, used to be a time when you could tap them on the shoulder, but that doesn't work anymore. Now you got to hit them with a
you have to like hit him over the head or something like that.
Yeah, you have to bludgeon them is what he said. And like I mean how true that is. Like, you know, even like 25 years later, like it still feels like I feel like now more than ever we live in a culture where, like, specifically talking about Kevin Spacey and cancel culture earlier, like where you kind of have to like really monitor what you say because like it comes back to haunt you, especially if it lives online. Like I think one of my most frustrating things about doing this podcast is like we're here talking about like mental health, something that's like really important. And you know, I don't want to say we struggle, like we do okay when it comes to like views and like listens, but like people that are like twerking and like
Oh my God.
eating like, you know, like dumb things on the internet, like just
that all
have these
TikTok
like
is?
cult following.
Isn't that
It's-
No,
exactly?
I'm not even saying TikTok. Like I'm just saying like YouTube's the same way. Like
That's
now I
TikTok.
sound like a grumpy old man like you guys.
Yeah.
Well, it's because I feel like as a culture, like we glorified the wrong things.
Oh yeah.
Like, you know, we don't, you know, going back to that sentiment about like being able to like knock on someone, like you used to be able to like actually have like conversations and it would end civilly. Like it's one of the things that
You can
like,
agree
you know,
to disagree.
yeah.
And now you're not allowed.
Can't you?
There's
Why-
a,
who said you can't agree to disagree and just call it that? I have many people that I agree to disagree because you guys do know that I do Jim Bob John. Even my friends would be like, "Whoa," you know. So you can have conversations without having such a division line there.
It's
Yes.
few and far between these days. I actually have
yes, that's
so
what I was gonna
the,
say.
I'm not going to get into details on it, but the people that introduced me and my wife were real good friends of us, of both of ours, and they couldn't handle agree to disagree,
Right.
and they picked fights and make everybody around them miserable if you don't agree with them.
One of the things that like Mark talked about is like this this idea of like agreeing to disagree, and it seems now almost kind of like I don't say necessarily a foreign concept, but like Se7en.
All right. So you guys want to hear another note that I have?
Yes.
Fincher, right? I was just checking it out. One of the cool little details that he did not miss was the old detective had a revolver and Brad Pitt, the young detective, had a semi-automatic, right? So like Morgan Freeman was old school, Dirty Harry revolver, and Brad Pitt was new school, semi-automatic handgun. I thought it was a really interesting, like old school, new school technology when it comes to firearms. And hey, how much do you guys think without looking? Don't look, Josh. Right here, eyes on the camera. How much do you think the movie made, guys?
This movie was one of those movies that like I don't, like I said, I know a lot about the history of this movie, well, some, but like this movie, I mean, you talked about like how it was a breakout career for Brad Pitt. Like, yes, he had been doing movies for a while, but this was the movie that kind of like really put him on the map. This was a movie that really continued in the as Mark stated earlier, this was a movie that kind of continued in the trajectory of where Morgan Freeman was going at the time. This movie put Kevin Spacey on the map, put, you know, David Fincher, because Fincher at the time was making like music videos. Like he was doing like Nine Inch Nails and like doing like alternative stuff. So like this movie was one of those movies that started off really slow because it started off in the Mark, did you say it was released in December?
September 22nd, 1990.
Okay. So it's like it's released during like I would probably say that was like Labor Day weekend. So you have all of that This is a movie that grew by word of mouth. So I'm going to say that it grossed between 80 to $100 million.
Times that by 3. It made $327.3 million, and it cost roughly $30 million to make. That's how well this movie did at the box office. It was like a little sleeping giant for what was it, New Line Cinema?
Yeah, this was New Line.
Yeah, it really, like you said, it was word of mouth. People talked about it. They were like, "Hey, did you see Seven?" And everybody's like, "What do you mean Seven? Seven Dwarfs? No, Seven the movie. It's fucked up. This guy, he's a serial killer, right? And he's going after these people with the 7 deadly sins. But you don't see what is it, envy and wrath till the end."
Yep.
Hey,
There wasn't, I don't even know of anything
hold on,
like
hold
it
on.
that had come out.
So anger would be the same as wrath, I take it, because the 7
Yeah.
deadly sins I have is pride, covetousness, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, sloth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would be anger. Anger
And wrath. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interchangeable.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
That is fantastic.
well, all right. I think it's going to do it for us on this episode. We've covered a lot of ground, and I've got a lot of water calling back to me. So, where can people follow you online, Jay, and where can people pick up the books?
They can follow me on The Art of Jason-Seaux on Facebook, Instagram, Jason-Seaux. They can find me through necro-man. The Jim Bob John site has not been released yet. That's about it. Oh, and the jason-seaux.com site is really fun. It just traffics you around to a holding page because I've owned my name for like 2 years and not done a damn thing with it. That's just who I am as a person, I guess.
Every time I see you, man, you're like, it'll get done. It'll get done. Mark, where can people follow you online?
I'm just a nerd painting miniatures and crap. So I'm on Instagram at Titanium Juggernaut Painting.
You paint miniatures?
Yes.
Oh my, hold on. Yeah, we'll talk as soon as this podcast.
That's his side gig. So
yeah, I paint like Warhammer miniatures and stuff like that.
Well, well, thank you, Josh, for having me. And I take it we'll continue this conversation after the podcast. But
yeah.
7 was rad. 7 is amazing.
Yeah, so you guys can follow my journey on my film journey over at Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. I've already plugged my TikTok, and you guys can follow us. Follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and of course, wherever you guys get your podcast from. Remember, until next time, remember the longer that you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.